All right, we're going to switch gears. Have you ever heard the saying, do first, then ask for forgiveness later? Yeah, you've heard that, right? It could just as well go to college first and then figure out how to pay for it later, or then maybe ask for forgiveness for that, because that's what a lot of people are doing right now. And they've been doing it for a long time, paying for college, paying off those student loans, and now wondering how they're going to pay off the rest of them. Recent estimates from the Federal Reserve say American student loan debt, federal student loan debt, nearly $1.75 trillion. And today, the Biden administration announced their plan to tackle the problem. Just forgive it, at least some of it. Here's Andrew Bartline.
The plan after graduation isn't always clear.
That question filled me with so much anxiety, man.
But Brian Stelbotsky is far from unprepared.
Currently a doctoral student here at Boise State.
To get here, Brian first earned his bachelor's and master's from the University of Pittsburgh.
I took on some student debt to help with my undergraduate degree.
That was in 2009, and Brian still pays for it today. He's one of the millions that make up the nearly $1.75 trillion of student loan debt.
It's obviously out of control. It's been a big discussion for a long time and doesn't show any signs of getting better.
And the White House knows it. The Biden administration announced their plan today to control the problem by forgiving debt. Pell Grant recipients can have up to $20,000 of debt canceled. Other federal student loans can expect up to $10,000.
You've got to be joking.
It's exciting news.
That is awesome.
For Joe Cole, who just took out a student loan.
It's about $10,000.
He's headed into his freshman year at Boise State. Cole admits he didn't put a lot of thought into a 5-figure loan to begin with.
Definitely kind of flown into it, so.
For a student to qualify for relief, their individual income must be less than $125,000 a year. Household income must be less than $250,000.
Very mixed feelings.
Stephen Peterson is a clinical associate professor of economics at the University of Idaho, and he understands the financial burden students are under just to afford college.
Adjusted for inflation, the tuition that I paid back in the late 70s would have been equivalent to about $1,000 a semester today.
However, Professor Peterson says Biden's announcement could have unintended consequences, because the money doesn't just disappear.
It's going to cost around $300 billion. That's what I've seen. It's going to add to the national debt. So I have concerns about that.
The federal debt number is an inconceivable number in my head. Why should I care if it's going to grow even further?
At some point, if the debt gets high enough, it ultimately could threaten the stability of the economic system in the United States. Now, we're nowhere near that. But we've seen countries where that has occurred, such as Greece.
Peterson says this debt forgiveness could incentivize people to take out student loans they can't pay and just expect it to be forgiven in the future.
If the incentives don't line up right, you could actually make the student loan debt worse in the long run.
Even though Brian's debt is manageable,
I'm not going to complain about having some of that relieved, of course.
He says loan forgiveness is a necessity for others who are in far worse positions, all for the same reasons.
I think if we've gotten ourselves into a situation where there's a level of student debt nationally that we're concerned about, then there have to be some discussions about how we've gotten there, how we might change the system or the structures that have enabled us to be there in the first place.
Peterson says he's more in favor of filing for bankruptcy, making it easier for people to file for bankruptcy with student loans. Peterson is afraid this relief money could go toward people who don't necessarily need it, who otherwise are capable of paying off their student loans. With bankruptcy, Brian, the courts can decide on a case-by-case basis who is in the most need. So that money doesn't go in places where perhaps it shouldn't.
Yeah, because, with a student loan, you don't just get to just disregard a federal student loan when you declare bankruptcy. At least that's how I was told, and that's kind of how that plays out. Is that different now where you can?
I know it's very difficult to get a federal loan under bankruptcy. The laws have changed with time. It is extremely difficult to make that happen. If you got that loan, you got to pay it back. You cannot file for bankruptcy. It is extremely rare.
Okay, you and I were talking about this earlier. Like as you heard one of the people say, I don't know, I'm just flying by the seat of my pants in this and just basically gambling on yourself, taking a business loan to say I'm going to pay this back because I'm going to be the business that you're going to invest in. There's a lot of people, including myself, I'll be honest, that just went into college thinking, I don't know how I'm going to pay for it, but I'll take that money and I'll pay for it later.
Yeah, out of the people I talked to today, just walking around Boise State, I confidently say I probably talked to about 100 people. I was there for a couple hours. Most of them really were not fully aware of what they were going to when they got these loans, or a lot of them don't even know how they're going to college. I asked them, what are you doing? How is it going to impact you? They said, I don't really know. I'm just here.
I know. Another thing, I did a little research because, again, this is one of those things where I don't have a grasp of this because some people are claiming they have $30,000 in debt when it comes to student loans. I'm going to date myself here, but when I went to college, it was about $1,000 a year, to go to school. And that the same school right now is about $11,000, which is amazing to me how this happens, that inflation, which if we account for inflation, it would only be about $2,000, but instead it's $11,000. So I can see where we got to this point, I guess, right?
I got friends from school who probably owe $80,000, so it gets real worse than that.
And so that's why these 10,000s or at least 20,000 in some cases is very welcomed. Okay, so Andrew, thank you very much. How did we get here on this? How did nearly 45 million people get into this $1.75 trillion hole to the federal government? Here in Idaho, we have 218,000 with federal student loan debt who owe about $7.2 billion, which is about an average about $33,000 each. These numbers from the Education Data Initiative back in April. I'm willing to bet a lot of them either didn't realize what they were getting into, like we just discussed, or the cost of college just keeps going up, which is true, yes. So if that was you, and you took a federal student loan to pay for higher ed, you agreed to paying it back in one of several ways. There's the standard repayment plan, where you paid a fixed payment for over a 10-year period. Paying the same amount for 120 months saves you money and interest, but those payments are going to be a bit higher than the other repayment plans, like the graduated repayment plan. Choosing this option doesn't qualify you for a loan forgiveness program because, well, that loan could be as long as 30 years, especially if you consolidated or combined your loans. And your payments increase over time with that one. The extended repayment plan might be what you chose if you had more than $30,000 in college debt, because you could stretch that payback time frame to about 25 years. And those monthly payments, well, they could be fixed or they could be graduated. But if you wanted to pay less and maybe over a longer period of time, maybe you chose a repayment plan that depends on your income. And there are 4 plans under this category, depending on which one you're paying 10 to 20% of your discretionary income. That number is determined by the government. But let's focus on just one of those. The income-based repayment plan takes a percentage of your discretionary income, what you have left after paying for stuff like rent, food, that kind of thing. Without getting into the formula that they use, let's say you have a $30,000 loan. You're married, you got a kid, you're making $35,000 a year at your job, and with a 10-year standard plan, well, you'd be paying $311 a month. But under the income-based plan, based on that 10% of your discretionary income, you'd be paying about $20 a month, $20.17 a month. So that's how it's set up now. But what about going forward? Well, the Biden administration today came up with a new rule for repayments to make it more manageable, they say. And there are 4 parts to this perspective plan. Instead of a minimum of 10% of your income, they're going to drop that down to 5% for your discretionary income, and then raise the amount of what they would consider non-discretionary income, protecting it. That stuff you use to pay for rent and food, they're going to protect it from being part of your repayment formula. Meaning if you're making $15 an hour, you won't have to pay anything. The third one on this is the forgive the balances after 10 years, instead of 20 for those who still owe less than $12,000. And the fourth element to this is, well, they're going to cover the borrower's unpaid monthly interest. So as long as you're making payments, your balance won't grow.